"You're mining Bitcoin while kids are in emergency surgery." I said it calm and direct, like I was telling CEO Von Harwick that his parking spot was expired. "My name's Elena Vasquez. I'm 29, and I've been the network security specialist at Mercy General Hospital in Phoenix, Arizona for 4 years. When people ask what I do, I tell them I'm the person who makes sure the machines keeping your grandmother alive don't get hacked by teenagers in Estonia. It's not glamorous work. I spend my days monitoring firewall logs, patching vulnerabilities, and making sure our patient data systems can't be accessed by anyone who shouldn't have it. But here's the thing about hospital cybersecurity. When I mess up, people don't just lose their credit card information, they lose their lives. I take that responsibility seriously because I've seen what happens when hospital systems fail. 3 years ago, before I came to Mercy General, I worked at Desert Regional where a ransomware attack shut down our entire network for 6 hours. Ventilators went to backup power, surgical schedules got canceled, and ambulances had to be diverted to other facilities. 2 elderly patients died during transfers that wouldn't have been necessary if our systems had been properly secured. That's why I moved to Mercy General. They promised me a real cybersecurity budget and administrative support to build something bulletproof. The pay was better, the equipment was newer, and the hospital had a reputation for putting patient safety above everything else. Or at least, that's what I thought until I started noticing some very strange patterns in our server activity. Mercy General runs on a sophisticated network of interconnected systems, patient monitoring equipment, surgical robots, medication dispensers, imaging machines. Everything talks to everything else through our central server farm. It's my job to make sure all that communication stays secure and efficient. So when I started seeing unusual spikes in GPU processing during the night shift, during emergency surgeries, during the exact moments when our systems needed to be running at peak performance, I knew something was very, very wrong. What I discovered next would cost me my job, threaten my career, and ultimately expose the most reckless abuse of power I'd ever encountered in healthcare. It started on a Tuesday night in March. I was running my weekly security audit when I noticed something odd in the GPU utilization reports. Our graphics processing units were spiking to 95% capacity between 11 p.m. and 6 a.m., exactly during the hours when our emergency department was busiest and our surgical suites were handling the most critical cases. This made no sense. Mercy General's GPUs were primarily used for medical imaging, CT scans, MRIs, real-time surgical navigation systems. During night shifts, imaging demand should have been lower, not higher. But the processing patterns I was seeing didn't match medical imaging workflows. They were consistent, repetitive, and running continuously in the background. I started digging deeper into the network traffic logs. What I found made my stomach drop. Hidden processes were running on our main server cluster, disguised with legitimate-sounding names like MedImage Backup and System Optimizer V2. But when I traced their actual function, they weren't backing up anything or optimizing systems. They were connecting to external cryptocurrency mining pools. Someone had installed sophisticated mining software on our hospital's critical infrastructure. The software was designed to avoid detection by standard monitoring tools, scheduled to run during peak hospital hours when IT oversight was minimal, and configured to use exactly enough processing power to stay under most automated alert thresholds. But here's what made this discovery truly terrifying. The mining operations were drawing computational resources away from life-critical systems during the exact moments when patients needed them most. While our servers were busy generating Bitcoin, our patient monitoring systems were experiencing micro-delays. Surgical equipment was running slower. Emergency response systems were lagging. I spent the next 3 days documenting everything. Network logs, processing timestamps, cryptocurrency wallet addresses, transaction histories. I traced the mining software's installation date back to 6 months ago, right around the time CEO Von Harwick had announced his digital transformation initiative for the hospital. The more I investigated, the more sophisticated the operation appeared. This wasn't some amateur hacker who'd gotten lucky. Someone with administrative access and detailed knowledge of our systems had carefully planned this operation, knowing exactly what risks they were creating for patients and deciding those risks were acceptable. The breakthrough came when I traced the cryptocurrency wallet addresses. Every transaction led back to the same registered email address, v.harwick@mercygeneral.org, Vaughn Harwick, our CEO. I sat in my office at 2 a.m. staring at the evidence on my screen, hoping I'd made a mistake. Vaughn Harwick was a 42-year-old healthcare executive who'd been brought in 18 months ago to modernize Mercy General's operations. He had an MBA from Northwestern, experience at 3 major hospital networks, and a reputation for innovative cost-cutting measures. The board loved him because he'd increased our profit margins by 23% in his first year. But now I understood how he'd achieved those numbers. While publicly talking about efficiency improvements and strategic partnerships, he'd been secretly siphoning computing power from critical medical systems to mine cryptocurrency. The profits were going directly into his personal wallets. Over $85,000 in Bitcoin and Ethereum accumulated over 6 months. I pulled up his administrative access logs. Harwick had been logging into our server systems during off hours, weekends, and holidays. Times when the hospital was running on skeleton IT staff and administrative oversight was minimal. He'd used his executive privileges to install the mining software, configure the scheduling systems, and modify monitoring protocols to avoid detection. The most damning evidence was a series of encrypted files I found in his user directory. Technical specifications for optimizing cryptocurrency mining on medical infrastructure. Cost-benefit analyses comparing mining profits to potential system performance impacts. Email drafts discussing expanding the operation to other hospitals in the network. One document was titled, Acceptable Risk Parameters for Revenue Enhancement. It contained calculations about how much processing power could be diverted from medical systems before causing noticeable degradation in patient care outcomes. He'd literally calculated the acceptable level of patient endangerment for his personal profit. Another file contained correspondence with cryptocurrency consultants about maximizing mining efficiency during peak operational hours at medical facilities. He'd researched this operation extensively, understood exactly what he was doing, and made deliberate choices to prioritize his financial gain over patient safety. I printed everything: network logs, financial records, wallet transactions, email evidence, system access reports. 300 pages of documentation proving that our CEO had been running an illegal cryptocurrency mining operation on life-critical hospital infrastructure, while patients were fighting for their lives just floors below. Thursday morning, I walked into Vaughn Harwick's corner office on the executive floor carrying a manila folder with the evidence. His office was all floor-to-ceiling windows and modern furniture, with framed photos of him shaking hands with state legislators and healthcare industry leaders. Awards for healthcare innovation and excellence in hospital administration lined the walls. "Elena," he said, looking up from his laptop with that practiced executive smile, "what brings you up to the C-suite? Security issues?" I set the folder on his mahogany desk. "We need to talk about the cryptocurrency mining operation you're running on our medical servers." His expression didn't change. Not surprise, not confusion, not denial. Just a slight narrowing of his eyes as he leaned back in his leather chair. That told me everything I needed to know. "I'm not sure what you're referring to," he said, but his voice had lost that friendly executive tone. I opened the folder and spread out the evidence. Bitcoin wallet transactions totaling $85,000. Mining software installed under your administrative credentials. Network traffic to cryptocurrency pools during surgical procedures. Email correspondence about expanding operations to other hospitals. Harwick glanced at the papers, then looked back at me with an expression I'd never seen from him before. Cold. Calculating. The mask of the caring healthcare leader completely dropped. "You're thinking too small, Elena," he said finally. "Hospitals are sitting on massive computational resources that go unused 60% of the time. This is about maximizing institutional assets for strategic revenue generation." I stared at him. "You're mining crypto while children are having emergency surgery. The processing delays are affecting patient monitoring systems." "Minimal impact," he waved his hand dismissively. "I've run extensive risk analyses. The performance degradation falls within acceptable parameters for medical equipment tolerance." "Acceptable to who? Did you ask the parents of the kids in our NICU if cryptocurrency profits are worth risking their babies' lives?" Harwick stood up and walked to his window overlooking the hospital parking lot. You don't understand modern healthcare economics. Every hospital in America is facing budget pressures. Insurance reimbursements are declining, regulatory costs are increasing, and patient expectations keep rising. Forward-thinking executives find innovative revenue streams. This isn't innovation, it's theft, and it's endangering patients. He turned back to me with that cold smile. Prove it caused actual harm. Show me one patient who died because of system lag, one surgery that failed because of processing delays. I was called into HR at 8 a.m. Monday morning. Elena, we need to discuss some concerning behavior, said Patricia Chen, our Human Resources Director, sliding a termination notice across her desk. Unauthorized access to executive systems, violation of data privacy protocols, and inappropriate investigation of senior leadership. I read through the document. Every accusation was technically defensible but completely twisted. Yes, I'd accessed server logs. Yes, I'd traced network traffic. Yes, I'd examined administrative user activities. All things that were literally part of my job description as network security specialist. These are routine cybersecurity procedures, I said. I was investigating suspicious network activity that was compromising our medical systems. Vaughn feels you overstepped your authority, Patricia replied. He's concerned about your access to sensitive executive communications and recommends immediate termination to protect hospital operations. The irony was staggering. The man who'd been illegally mining cryptocurrency on life support systems was firing me for discovering his operation. He'd managed to spin this as a rogue IT employee violating privacy protocols rather than a security specialist uncovering criminal activity. What about the mining software I found? The cryptocurrency wallets? The system performance impacts during surgeries? Patricia looked genuinely confused. I'm not aware of any such issues. Vaughn mentioned you might make unfounded allegations as a defensive reaction to being terminated for cause. He'd gotten ahead of this, painted me as a disgruntled employee who would fabricate stories to avoid accountability. Clean narrative, no mention of the actual evidence I'd discovered, and my word against the CEO's reputation. I signed the termination papers without arguing, handed over my access badge, building key card, and laptop. Walked out to my car in the parking lot and sat there for 20 minutes, not angry but calculating. Vaughn Harwick had made a critical error. He thought firing me would eliminate the problem, that removing the person who'd discovered his operation would somehow erase the evidence. But I'd been documenting everything for weeks. Full records stored in multiple locations, backed up to external drives, copies secured off-site. He'd neutralized the witness but not the testimony. And now I had something even more damaging, proof that he was willing to destroy careers to cover up his crimes. The termination itself was evidence of consciousness of guilt. I started my car and drove home, already planning my next move. Vaughn Harwick was about to learn that silencing a cybersecurity specialist is much harder than he thought. I spent Monday afternoon in my home office organizing everything into a comprehensive case file. Server logs with timestamps showing mining activity during surgical procedures. Financial records proving $85,000 in cryptocurrency profits going to Harwick's personal wallets. Email evidence of his planning and risk calculations. System performance data demonstrating the impact on medical equipment during critical patient care moments. Then I made my first call to the Arizona Department of Health Services Fraud Reporting Hotline. I need to report healthcare fraud involving the compromise of life-critical medical systems, I told the investigator. I have documentation of a hospital CEO running unauthorized cryptocurrency mining operations on patient care infrastructure. The investigator asked detailed questions about the timing, the technical impact, and the potential patient safety implications. This is serious, she said. We'll need to forward this to the medical board and possibly federal authorities. Are you willing to provide testimony and technical evidence? Absolutely. My second call was to the FBI's Healthcare Fraud Division. This involves potential violations of federal cybersecurity regulations at a medical facility, I explained. Computer fraud, wire fraud, and endangerment of patients through deliberate system compromise. By Tuesday morning, I had case numbers with 3 different agencies: Arizona DHS, the State Medical Board, and the FBI's Phoenix field office. I'd also contacted 2 investigative journalists who specialized in healthcare corruption cases, but I wasn't done. I reached out to my professional network, other cybersecurity specialists who worked at hospitals across Arizona. Has anyone noticed unusual server activity during peak medical hours? I asked carefully. GPU spikes that don't correlate with imaging demands. 3 colleagues from different hospital systems responded with concerning observations. Similar patterns, similar timing, all during periods when Harwick had been consulting with their facilities on digital optimization projects. This wasn't just happening at Mercy General. Harwick had been expanding his operation across multiple hospitals in the Phoenix metro area, using his reputation and consulting contracts to install mining software on medical infrastructure throughout the region. I documented everything and prepared a supplemental report for the investigators. What I'd initially thought was isolated criminal activity at one hospital was actually a systematic operation affecting multiple medical facilities and potentially thousands of patients. Wednesday morning, Special Agent Rebecca Torres from the FBI called me back. Ms. Vasquez, we've reviewed your documentation. This case involves federal healthcare fraud, computer crimes, and potential wire fraud. We'd like to meet with you this afternoon to discuss cooperation with our investigation. Thursday morning at 9 a.m., I was walking back into Mercy General Hospital with 3 FBI agents, 2 cybersecurity forensic specialists, and an investigator from the Arizona Attorney General's office. The look on Von Harwick's face when he saw me in the lobby with federal law enforcement was worth every sleepless night I'd spent documenting his crimes. "What's the meaning of this?" he demanded, approaching our group with the confident stride of someone who still thought he controlled the situation. Special Agent Torres showed her credentials. "Mr. Harwick, we're here regarding allegations of computer fraud and healthcare fraud affecting critical patient care systems. We'll need immediate access to your server infrastructure and administrative records." "This is absurd," Harwick said, but I could see the first crack in his composure. Elena Vasquez was terminated for unauthorized system access and making false allegations. She's not authorized to be in this building. "She's here as a cooperating witness in a federal investigation," Agent Torres replied calmly. "We also have warrants for your computer systems, financial records, and administrative communications." Within an hour, we had complete access to Mercy General's IT infrastructure. What the forensics team found exceeded even my documentation. The mining operation was more extensive than I'd realized. Multiple cryptocurrency wallets, transactions dating back 8 months, estimated profits exceeding $125,000. But the real breakthrough came when they examined Harwick's personal laptop and executive communications, email chains with consultants from 3 other hospital systems, discussing revenue optimization through computational asset utilization, technical specifications for installing mining software on medical infrastructure, financial projections for expanding the operation regionally. "Look at this," one of the forensics specialists said, pointing to her laptop screen. March 18th, during a pediatric heart surgery, mining activity spiked to maximum capacity, while the patient monitoring system experienced a 34-second delay in data processing. Agent Torres turned to Harwick. "Were you aware that your mining operation was directly impacting life-critical systems during active surgical procedures on children?" "There's no proven causal relationship," he said quickly, but the confidence was gone from his voice. "System delays can have multiple causes." "That's not what I asked," Torres replied. "Were you aware that your cryptocurrency mining was consuming processing power needed for patient monitoring during surgeries?" The hospital administrator, Dr. Sarah Mitchell, stepped forward looking stunned. "Vaughn, is this true? Have you been running unauthorized software on our medical systems?" Harwick's carefully constructed facade was crumbling. "This is a misunderstanding. I was exploring innovative revenue streams to help the hospital's financial position. The forensics investigation took 2 full days. What they uncovered painted a disturbing picture of systematic deception and criminal enterprise spanning multiple hospitals across Arizona. Harwick hadn't just been mining cryptocurrency at Mercy General. He'd been running similar operations at 4 other medical facilities where he served as a consultant. The evidence was overwhelming. Email correspondence with mining pool operators about maximizing profits during peak operational windows at medical facilities. Financial records showing over $340,000 in cryptocurrency profits across all locations. Technical documentation proving he deliberately configured the mining software to avoid detection by standard hospital IT monitoring systems. But the most damaging discovery was his personal research files. Harwick had compiled detailed analyses of acceptable patient risk levels, calculating how much system delay would be statistically unnoticed by medical staff during different types of procedures. He'd studied emergency room response times, surgical equipment tolerances, and patient monitoring thresholds to optimize his mining operations for maximum profit with minimal detection. One file was titled Pediatric Procedure Risk Assessment, a cold clinical analysis of how much processing power could be diverted from children's medical equipment before causing observable adverse outcomes. He'd literally calculated acceptable levels of endangerment for babies and children to maximize his Bitcoin mining efficiency. The investigation team also found evidence of cover-up activities, system logs that had been selectively deleted, monitoring reports that had been altered, and maintenance records that had been falsified to hide equipment performance issues caused by resource conflicts with mining software. Dr. Mitchell, the hospital administrator, was visibly shaken as the evidence mounted. How many patients were potentially affected? She asked Agent Torres. Based on the timestamps and surgical schedules, we estimate over 2,800 procedures occurred during periods of active mining operations across all 5 facilities, Torres replied. We're working with medical staff to identify any cases where system delays may have impacted patient care. The medical review revealed several concerning incidents. A premature infant whose oxygen monitoring system had experienced a 45-second delay during a critical respiratory crisis. An elderly patient whose cardiac monitoring had frozen for nearly a minute during emergency resuscitation. A teenage accident victim whose surgical navigation system had lagged during neurosurgery, forcing doctors to pause the operation while equipment recalibrated. None of these patients had died, but each incident had created unnecessary risk and stress during already critical medical situations. Harwick's pursuit of cryptocurrency profits had literally gambled with human lives, and he'd done it deliberately, knowing exactly what risks he was creating. The federal indictment came down 3 weeks later. 18 counts including healthcare fraud, computer fraud, wire fraud, and conspiracy. The Department of Justice wanted to make an example of someone who'd compromised patient safety for personal profit in such a systematic way. The defendant operated a sophisticated criminal enterprise that deliberately endangered vulnerable patients across multiple medical facilities, the prosecutor said during the arraignment. He calculated acceptable levels of risk to human life in order to maximize his cryptocurrency profits. Harwick's defense attorney tried arguing that no patients had been directly harmed by the mining operations, but the evidence was overwhelming. Server logs, financial records, email correspondence, and expert testimony from medical professionals created an ironclad case of willful endangerment. The trial lasted 5 days. I testified for 6 hours, walking the jury through the technical details of how the mining software worked and its impact on critical medical systems. The most powerful testimony came from Dr. Jennifer Walsh, the pediatric surgeon who'd been operating during the respiratory crisis. When we're working on a premature baby whose lungs are failing, every second matters, she told the jury. A 45-second delay in oxygen monitoring data could be the difference between brain damage and normal development. The idea that someone would deliberately compromise those systems for personal profit is unconscionable. The jury deliberated for 3 hours, guilty on all counts. Harwick's sentencing hearing was packed with medical professionals, patient advocates, and family members whose loved ones had been treated during the mining operations. The judge's statement was particularly pointed. Healthcare executives hold positions of extraordinary public trust. Patients and families depend on hospital systems to function reliably during their most vulnerable moments. The defendant betrayed that trust in the most calculated way possible, prioritizing personal profit over human life while maintaining a facade of caring leadership. 12 years in federal prison. 7 years supervised release. Full restitution of $340,000 plus investigative costs and system remediation expenses, totaling over $800,000. His medical administration license was permanently revoked, and he was banned from working in healthcare for life. But the consequences extended far beyond Harwick himself. The case prompted congressional hearings on healthcare cybersecurity. New federal regulations required hospitals to implement enhanced monitoring systems for IT infrastructure. The Department of Health and Human Services created a task force specifically focused on preventing similar incidents. All 5 hospitals involved hired independent cybersecurity firms to completely rebuild their IT infrastructures with military-grade monitoring systems that made another mining operation impossible. The phone call came on a Tuesday morning while I was having coffee and reading about cybersecurity job openings. Elena, this is Dr. Sarah Mitchell from Mercy General. I know the circumstances of your departure were complicated. We'd like to offer you the position of Chief Information Security Officer. Not just my old job back, a promotion to executive level with a mandate to rebuild our entire cybersecurity infrastructure from the ground up. The salary was double what I'd been making, plus a budget for a full security team and cutting-edge monitoring equipment. We need someone who understands the real threats hospitals face, Dr. Mitchell explained. Someone who'll put patient safety above everything else, including political considerations. Your willingness to expose Harwick's operation, even at personal cost, shows exactly the kind of integrity we need in leadership. Within 3 months, I'd hired 4 additional cybersecurity specialists and implemented real-time monitoring systems that could detect any unauthorized process within seconds. We installed network segmentation that isolated critical medical systems from administrative networks. Every server, every device, every connection was monitored and secured, but the work expanded beyond Mercy General. Other hospitals across Arizona and neighboring states began reaching out for consultation. Healthcare networks that had heard about the Harwick case wanted comprehensive security audits to ensure they weren't vulnerable to similar operations. The consulting work was steady and well-paid, but more importantly, it was meaningful. I was actively preventing the kind of negligence that had endangered patients under Harwick's operation. Each vulnerability I closed, each security protocol I implemented, each monitoring system I installed was a barrier between patient care and the kind of calculated recklessness Harwick had represented. 6 months after the trial, I received an invitation to speak at the National Healthcare Cybersecurity Conference. Standing in front of 800 healthcare IT professionals, I told the story of how one CEO's greed had nearly compromised patient safety across multiple hospitals, and how proper security protocols could prevent similar incidents. Real innovation in healthcare means finding better ways to save lives, I told the audience. Everything else is just theft with better marketing. The case had transformed my career from maintenance technician to industry leader. But more importantly, it had demonstrated that doing the right thing, even at personal cost, ultimately leads to better outcomes for everyone who depends on these critical systems. The Harwick case became a landmark in healthcare cybersecurity law. Federal prosecutors began using it as a template for investigating similar cases across the country. Within 18 months, 3 other hospital executives were indicted for comparable cryptocurrency mining operations, all directly traced to investigative techniques developed during our case. Medical schools added the case to their ethics curricula. Students learned about the importance of maintaining absolute integrity in medical systems and the severe consequences of prioritizing profit over patient safety. Healthcare administration programs required courses on cybersecurity ethics, specifically because of the precedent Harwick's crimes had established. The Department of Health and Human Services created the Vasquez Protocol, a standardized set of cybersecurity monitoring requirements for all hospitals receiving federal funding. Any medical facility with more than 50 beds had to implement real-time system monitoring capable of detecting unauthorized cryptocurrency mining within 30 seconds. But the most satisfying outcome was personal. Last month, I received a letter from Maria Santos, whose 3-year-old daughter had been in our NICU during one of Harwick's mining operations. I just learned about what happened and wanted to thank you, she wrote. Elena is healthy and starting preschool now. Knowing that someone was looking out for her safety when we couldn't makes all the difference. That letter sits framed on my office wall next to my Chief Information Security Officer certification. It reminds me every day why this work matters, not for the technology or the investigative satisfaction, but for the Elena Santos of the world who deserve to know that hospital systems are absolutely uncompromisingly reliable when their lives depend on it. Von Harwick thought he was being innovative by finding creative revenue streams while calculating acceptable risks to patient safety. His real innovation was demonstrating that there's no acceptable level of endangerment when human lives are at stake. The last I heard, he was serving his sentence at a federal facility in Oklahoma, probably still convinced that he was just ahead of his time. Meanwhile, hospitals across the country have implemented security protocols that make his type of operation impossible. That's the difference between real innovation and criminal opportunism. One builds systems that protect people. The other exploits systems that people depend on for their lives. I know which side of that line I'll always choose to stand on.